Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the March 7th Committee of the Whole meeting. Please stand for our Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Limited public comment at this time. Anybody wishing to address the board, any member of the public may do so for up to 3 minutes.
Eldon Schallenbarger Hastings. I'd like to see that this board is finally moving in a positive direction. And when I say that is, for years I've griped and complained why the COA couldn't be moved in with the Thornapple Manor or services out there, and I finally see some progression towards that way, and it's a positive, progressive. Now, the other complaint is Berry Eaton County Health Board. Berry County have their own health board. This is another direction that we need to move in to make it more of a positive direction. And I don't know why it takes yelling, screaming, and a lot of roaring, and like making two elephants mating, it takes 10 years or more to do something. And I'm glad to see that the board is moving in a positive direction. Now, if we could get some other things done within the county with some of these boards and administration things to save the taxpayers some dollars, that I'd be all for that, and I'm sure so would the taxpayers. And not only the health department, but other things like Charlton Park, that's a dead horse in the water. Take it off the back of the taxpayers. We should make it self-sufficient like it should be. Irving Charlton gave it to the people of Berry County, and we shouldn't have to pay for it, especially the ones who don't use it. I mean, if you're going to have things like this, you guys are going to have to take and start charging the people who are using it and not the people who are not using it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment? Good morning, Cindy.
Good morning. Cindy Twitchell, Prairieville Township. To be honest with you, I never thought I would ever be involved in politics. 4 years ago, I was satisfied at just being a wife, a mom, and a Mima. Then COVID hit and craziness began. I watched as our country was beginning to be taken over by an agenda that was set on destroying this great nation. I watched as Americans turn on each other in a way that it felt like the Civil War, but without the bloodshed. People took sides, and families and friends turned on each other. I watched as children's education was being destroyed. First, by not being allowed to attend school in person, which stunted their social skills, but not only that, it stunted their education, because those who needed the extra help were not able to get it because everything was being done remotely. And then today, now through sexual exploitation and gender confusion. I really became angry at watching all of this happen, wondering how in the world did we get here? So I began to educate myself on the history of our great nation and the Constitution that it is supposed to stand on, and that each of you took an oath to defend and uphold. Then I got involved. I never was one who liked to speak in public, believe it or not, and I still am not. But I couldn't let my fear of public speaking stop me. I learned that, as our forefathers stated in the Declaration of Independence, that governments are instituted to secure the rights that God gave us. Government does not give us our rights. God does. But also, they govern only at the consent of those they govern. And since silence is considered consent, I could not stay silent. I truly believe that America is a nation like no other. America truly has been blessed more than any other nation in history. Americans have enjoyed an unprecedented level of freedom, prosperity, opportunity, and stability. America has had only one Constitution since 1789. For Americans who are used to living in this kind of stability, this may not seem very impressive. However, when you realize that throughout history, the average length of a nation's constitution lifespan is only 17 years, you begin to get the sense that there is something special about this 234-year-old American Constitution. In fact, it has outlived every other national written constitution in history. France has had 15 constitutions since 1789. Haiti has had 23 since 1801. Venezuela, 25 since 1811. Ecuador, 20 since 1830. Thailand has had 20 since 1931. And I'm going to end here because I want to respect the unconstitutional 3-minute limit that you have set for us in public speaking, but I will finish at the end, at the next public comment.
Thank you, Cindy, and congratulations on your appointment to the State Board.
Thank you, and if I may just say, I really look forward at working with the District 2. Our goal is to revitalize the Republican Party and bring it back to its foundation of Declaration and Constitution and God, family, and country. And I look forward to doing that.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Cindy.
Is there additional public comment?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Sharon Zabrowski, Carlton Township. And you thought you were finally rid of me. That's funny. I gave you a couple of flyers. I know that all of you have a real difficult time keeping up with our seniors, but I did want you to know what they are up to. You have one that gives you some upcoming events for March. I did not give you the one that tells you what they do every week because I figured then you'd have to cancel this meeting and go home and take a nap because they are busy up there all the time. You'll also notice butterflies in bloom. They are taking a trip up to Myers Gardens on April 6th, $45 a person. That's going to include, it looks like, dinner, always the most important thing to me. And they will be looking at the butterflies before they all leave for the summer. So I hope that some of you will come up and just see if you can keep up with these seniors. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Is there additional public comment?
Good morning. Joel Ibbotson, Rutland Township. Eldon spurred a memory that I had a while ago that I hadn't thought of in some time.
Uh-oh.
A few weeks ago at the Barry Eaton District Health Department meeting, the health officer, Colette Scrimger, had stated that they had made it through all of COVID without missing any inspections of food facilities. That was a bold-faced lie. And what I mean by that, the first year, we have biannual inspections. They only inspected the restaurants once. And it wasn't even much of an inspection if you talk to any of the restaurants that were inspected. So anyway, I guess the motto there should be, if at first you don't succeed, redefine success, because that is what they have done. And I really do hope that we can look into, as Eldon said, continuing the productivity and separating ourselves from Eaton County, because they do not share our values. They do not share hardly anything with us anymore. So thanks.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
Pat Jameson, South Bowens Mills. First, I'd like to ask you all to deactivate Barry County from the blue zones again. Second, Survey Monkey. We tend to do a lot of government by survey monkey around here. We make policies and plans based on very limited public input. And I think that needs to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment? Good morning.
Good morning. Under Sheriff Jason Sixberry, I'm just coming back to reference the tabling from back in January, and haven't heard anything yet, so if I have to resubmit for those possible raises for the part-timers, just let me know. One way or the other, I did speak with Michael a week and a half after you asked when we tabled it, and so Administrator Brown and I talked, and I haven't heard anything since, so I'm just bringing my opinion back up, and if we have to resubmit, we'll resubmit. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
Good morning, John Lake, Irving Township. I've been a lifelong Berry County resident with the exception of a quick 21 years in the military. When I retired, well, first of all, in 1984, I took an oath of office to support, defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And with that is our Second Amendment rights. Right now, we're under attack by the left, and I'm not insulting anybody's intention or intelligence, but what's going on in Lansing right now with the gun legislation is sickening. I drove by M179, the new range is going in. It'd really be sad if we don't have our guns to actually use that facility. So what I'm asking you guys is that you adopt legislation or amendment or whatever it is that makes Berry County a Second Amendment sanctuary county. I read this morning, I think there's 47 counties within Michigan that have some form of support for the Second Amendment. And I think there's 32 or 34, and I know Kent and Ottawa right now are pushing to become sanctuary counties. We have the most constitutional sheriff, not in the state and the United States, who will support this. And I'm asking for your support as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
Bob Vanderbo, Hastings Township. I guess the previous public comments have stirred my thoughts here. We talk a lot about gun violence in the country, and it's sad what happened at Michigan State, and we all feel badly for those people. But the thing that disturbs me most about, and a lot of this probably comes from our media, but on the same day that 3 students were shot at Michigan State, how many babies were aborted in this state? How many children, young adults, died from illegal fentanyl in this state? The 3 children that were shot at Michigan State got a lot of publicity because they were loved by family and friends, and so therefore they got a lot of publicity and a lot of emotion out of it. What about these babies that no one knew, that only the mother knew, or maybe the mother and the father knew, or maybe nobody knew who the father was? That baby didn't have any representation. What about the kids, people that have died from fentanyl? And we have nothing about that. Dead is dead. And I have a problem with a state that has laws against killing people. If I'm in a car and driving along and a woman comes and runs a stop sign, a pregnant woman runs a stop sign and her baby dies, I get charged with manslaughter because I killed someone. However, had she stopped at that stop sign and made it to her destination on her way to the abortion clinic, she's free and clear to go. Now, I understand there's a lot of hype about a woman's rights, and there's 2 sides to every story, but we don't hear any of this on the news media and the seriousness of all of this. I mean, 300 kids a day die in the United States from fentanyl. And what are we doing about it? We're sitting back on our heels and not saying anything about it. Well, I finally got the guts to say something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Is there additional public comment? Hearing none, we will move ahead with our agenda. Thank you for that public comment this morning. Julie Nagfor Pratt.
Thank you, hi,
Good morning.
and welcome to all the new commissioners. I don't think I've been here since everybody got here, so welcome. So for those who might not know me, I'm Julie Nagfor Pratt, and I'm the prosecuting attorney here in Berry County. And I am actually here today to talk about Josh Carter. He is our, I say newest, he's not really new anymore. He is our, but he is the newest assistant prosecutor. In April, Josh Carter will achieve 7 years with my office. Dave Bannister's been there now over 20, and Chris and Jessica, two senior assistant prosecutors, have been there, I think, going over 15. So I'm really lucky, particularly in light of what's going on in the state and how other prosecutors' offices have struggled to either keep people or find new people. I have some amazing colleagues around the state, but it's just become an issue. So we consider our office very fortunate. On that note, though, back, I would say at least a year ago, Josh was eligible. Actually, he's had the qualifications now for about 2 to 3 years plus to become a senior assistant prosecutor. So our classification in our office has assistant prosecutor, well, there's 3, assistant prosecutor, senior assistant prosecutor, and chief assistant prosecutor. And Josh, with his just about 7 years, has surpassed the 3 to 5 years required to consider this promotion. So I asked for that in my budget, in the 2023 budget. It was not granted, but I wanted to make sure everybody, I wanted to expound on it for just a minute today, because I'm asking for it again, and I'm asking for Josh to not only have that promotion, but that it be retroactive to January 1st, 2023. So Luella was kind enough to help me with some numbers. So before I get into his qualifications quickly, I want to explain. So it would increase the 2023 budget for me if it happened, if it was retro back to January 1st, about $6,919. Because Josh has already reached, 3 years ago, Josh already reached his top of his classification as an assistant prosecutor. Jessica and Chris have far, far surpassed that, and so they look at raises that come with either whatever the association decides or their cost of living. Well, the same goes for Josh. But where I set Josh apart right now is that Josh has been actually performing the duties of a senior assistant prosecutor now for quite a while. If it began in March, so the other option would be retro payback to 3/11 of 23, it would be a $5,374 difference. As you can see, that for what Josh has given to this county, that's not a very big, it's not a very big amount of money, and it's clearly not very much more than if you just made it retro to 1 of 23. Again, I go back to January 1st because I did ask for it in the budget. So Josh currently has a salary of $65,624. That's his salary, from what I understand. And I'm not a math person, so kind of bear with me on that. I want to explain a couple things, though, about, so we pulled, again, thank you again to Luella for helping me pull some stuff that I thought would be helpful. So real quickly, this is the essential duties and responsibilities for a senior assistant prosecutor. I went through them and I checkmarked everything that Josh Carter already does. The things that are on here that he doesn't do are things that either aren't available anymore, which is the gun board, things like that, or there's nobody under him to supervise. So the first one said supervises APA 1, well, that's him. But Josh does, if we have an intern or if we have a student that follows, that shadows us, Josh would, he does a lot of district court, so he would help that person. But everything else, and I think it was attached to your paperwork, so I won't go through everything because there's not really a lot of time, but I did want to explain that every single thing on this list, He assists law enforcement, he appears in court, he acts as legal counsel, the department, well, we actually, our office doesn't act as legal counsel anymore to the Department of Human Services, but we do, Department of Health and Human Services, but we do assist them in court. We're just not their lawyer anymore. He's an excellent researcher. He prepares paperwork. He provides advice and instruction to police agencies. He attempts to resolve and dispose of pending cases. He drafts motions, briefs, and other legal documents. He provides appellate attorney services, and by that I mean, I want to clarify on that one. The prosecutor's office is a smaller office, so small prosecutors' offices in the state of Michigan, when somebody goes to trial and they're convicted, the appellate attorneys in Lansing, the Attorney General's office, helps us with that. If it's any other kind of appeal, and sometimes we might appeal something in the middle of something, then we do it. So Josh has done that. He's appeared in front of the Court of Appeals, and won, I might add. He represents the county on some civil matters, civil infraction tickets and other civil matters, dangerous dog complaints and things like that. Forfeitures of property. He represents the Attorney General in driver's license restoration, and actually he is the person in my office that does that. He can do and does do welfare cases, but Chris Ellsworth does most of those. He assists in the development of law enforcement and prosecution policies and protocols, and he participates in various programs and services, including our Safe Harbor Children's Advocacy Center. He's one of the main prosecutors that participates in that. Sobriety court, and he does appear for, I go to the detective and chief's meetings, and he goes to those, he and the other prosecutors go in my stead if I can. He does have the required educational experience. He has a bachelor's degree and he has a law degree, which he got many years ago. He has more than 3 to 5 years experience. He has the required licenses and certifications, and he's licensed to practice law in the state of Michigan. He is excellent with victims. Bookkeeping is on here. He doesn't necessarily do budget and bookkeeping, but he can help in matters if required. A couple personal things I want to say about Josh. Josh is very polite and professional. He is a strong research, he has strong abilities in research and writing. He's able to manage both a felony level, and I'll get to that in just a second, but both a felony level and misdemeanor level. He's the only person that actually still has a full district court docket. So district court's misdemeanors. Misdemeanors are defined as anything that carries a potential maximum of a year or less. So a first or second drunk driving, assault and battery, trespassing, those are misdemeanors. Josh does that full docket. He does have the help of Jessica and Chris when the docket is very full. In addition to that, he also has a felony docket. Felonies are described as anything with a potential maximum more than a year. That doesn't mean you get more than a year, it's just that's how a felony is defined. Josh has done some life offense felonies. He's assisted in murder cases. He has done sexual assault cases. He's done high profile cases. He has managed both of those type of dockets. He has that full misdemeanor caseload, and he's done very well in handling the pressures of some high profile cases that we have had. He is a very thorough person, and he's very prepared, and he's very overdue for this promotion. The other thing I want to say about Josh, he's amazing with victims. He's very good in his negotiations because he is polite and professional. He's not a person that comes across as bullyish. Nobody in my office does, but Josh just has a quiet way about him. So the reason I'm asking for this is not only is he earned it, I don't know how many times over, but he also, it's overdue, and I believe that Josh should be placed where he is supposed to be placed. So I'm asking for this promotion for Josh.
Very thorough.
Thank you.
Very convincing. I did talk to Michael Brown in detail about this because typically it's a little harder on the board to consider these promotions midterm when they weren't in the budget. And Michael had mentioned that this was more of an oversight on the part of the budgeting process than anything else, and that he agreed that this was overdue and that this should go through. So we rely on Michael for a lot of our financial guidance, as you know, and he is in agreement with this promotion for Josh as well. So are there additional questions for Julie? No questions? Okay. The chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to promote Joshua Carter from Assistant Prosecutor to Senior Assistant Prosecutor effective January 1st, 2023.
So moved, Doster.
Motion by Doster,
Support, Campbell.
support by Campbell. So, recommended to the Board of Commissioners for approval to promote Joshua Carter from Assistant Prosecutor to Senior Assistant Prosecutor effective January 1st, 2023. Motion by Doster, support by Campbell. Is there further discussion?
I'd just like to say I'm persuaded by Michael's comments. I don't think that I have any question or reservation about the qualifications and the appropriateness of the promotion. The one thing that, aside from Michael's comments, would have bothered me was making it retroactive because of the precedent that I think we set. And, yeah, that could have huge ramifications for us. But I think that Michael's comment that this was an oversight and should have been done as part of the process persuades me, and therefore, I'm fine with it.
Okay, further discussion?
Likewise, I agree with Commissioner Hatfield with that.
I feel the same way. I was thinking against the retroactive, but it seems it was an oversight. I'm for it.
Okay. All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
very
Julie.
much.
Let Josh know how much we appreciate his efforts and can give our congratulations as well. So,
I will, and thank you so much.
absolutely. Ivan Christopher. Good morning, Ivan and David.
I will start this off. Do you have the agenda request? Thank you. So what this is a policy that since Ivan joined us close to 2 years ago, and it's something that many of our neighbor counties have adopted, and it will make our lives, well, Ivan's life a little bit easier. So there's two parts to this. I guess I should back up a little bit. First of all, we'll get this out of the way. The fee schedule has not been looked at since 2014 was the last time I brought the fee schedule here. Honestly, we don't use the fee schedule very much at all. Way back when I started, it was more of a common thing, but now with most of our products being online, it's fairly rare unless somebody wants something printed or wants a data extract. Those are more common. So the change that we made to the fee schedule is custom mapping from $40, which it's been since at least 2014, to $50 an hour, half-hour minimum. And what that would comprise mostly is if somebody had a custom poster or map that they wanted that took a little bit of time to set up and get ready, and so that's where that custom mapping comes in. Doesn't come into play very often, but nevertheless, we felt like a small bump there was in order. And then you'll also see where it says digital information there. That is digital map information, and quite honestly, we don't sell that. It's extremely rare. Like those things were put on there with a thought that if somebody wanted to buy our maps in a digital form, they could do that, and there would be a mechanism for that. But the reality is, it just doesn't happen. What we do, however, is we share that information with engineering firms, government firms that are working with consultants, developers. We may share that information so that they can do what they need to do. And we have these I probably have a file of maybe a couple hundred, we call them data sharing agreements, 3-way agreements. which leads us into, we took that out. We would like to go with what's called an open data policy, whereby this information that we're sharing, we just make available on the internet. It's public information, it's not private information. Public information where these other agencies that need it can just go get it. They don't have to come to us. Takes out the middleman, it makes us more transparent. The policy, the open data policy, is a boilerplate from another county, but Ivan has put in a considerable amount of time researching several other counties that do this. So I don't want to steal any of his thunder, but if you have any questions, he's the guy. He's put in the time. I'm just the front man here. But I can tell you that people who would use, if you would say, well, who's going to pull this public data down, would be contractors for the Drain Commission that we work with all the time, exchanging information. We won't have to do that anymore. We can just point them to where it is. Cities, villages, townships, their engineers that they work with, same thing. Conservation Easement Board, broadband vendors, that's a big one, and that's been a real push, is that broadband vendors who want our parcel layer, for instance, or maybe our road center line layer. We don't have to worry about third-party agreements anymore, just send them there. Commercial residential developers, sewer authority, lake association, these are all groups that when they have work done, they need map data. So we're just looking to provide this in a way that they can get to it. In the policy, obviously, there's disclaimers. Did I leave anything out?
That's it, yeah.
So that's where we are, yeah. What our neighbors are doing, Eaton,
Eaton County has the same policy. Kent County has a similar policy, as well as Allegan. And then certainly once you get into the larger counties in the state, it's pretty standard.
Awesome. David, as I've read through this and look at it and listen to you, it appears that this is going to have minimal impact on local units of government, people accessing. As a matter of fact, it sounds like more information will be easily accessible and free.
that is the idea.
Okay.
And it essentially is now. It's just that we work through an agreement. The idea has been in the past that, an example would be that the village of Middleville is contracting an engineer to do some work on a sewer, and they need some of our mapping data. So we would have an agreement that Middleville understands that this company is getting the information from us for no cost, and so that the village would understand that that company didn't pay for it. So Ivan has done some communication with, or will be doing more with these agencies so that they understand that this information is now out there.
Okay, and this is something that will be more easily available, and it doesn't sound like this has ever been a big profit center for Land Information Services anyways. Okay.
No, the profit center, if you will, is something a little bit different, and that is what is left in there, which is, and these are statutory, like delinquent tax exports. Quite frequently, banks, mortgage companies, whomever will want a extract of a delinquent tax roll. And that is a statutory 25 cents per record fee that we don't have any control over. The other thing is the assessing, the tax roll. Companies frequently, not frequently, but 3 or 4 times a year will buy the assessment roll. It's not a map, it has nothing to do with a map, it's just database. Mm-hmm. But we handle that through our office. So those things stay, and the charges on those are not changing.
Awesome.
With open data, we're talking about what you see on Google that we produce.
Okay. Questions from commissioners?
I have a question, maybe it's for the commission itself regarding this. Do you think it'd be handy for us to have a complete township map set with the overlay here in the chambers that we could use for reference, you know, like for looking up these conservation easements, for example, that have been coming in front of us? It's a very handy guide. I know, you know, when I was a supervisor, I used it all the time because it just makes it so plain where it's located, where you're talking about, and you can see from above, and you can see the lines as an overlay thrown on it.
Probably not a bad thought. It's just so much of it's digital now. And as you see, we have so much space up here in the commissioner chamber, so, you know. But I'm not sure you're talking about digital prints or you
No, I was talking a printed set, yeah.
Yeah, well, I do have a thought on that, that it may behoove us that when the agendas go out, that Ivan gets put on that list and can scan that agenda, scan the packet, and if there's something, he can just look, and there's something there that he thinks would benefit the group to have a visual, just go ahead and produce it for the meeting. So, I mean, but it is, a lot of that information is on Fetch, but I'm a hands-on visual person still, and still use a pencil. So I'm with Mark a little bit on having something in front of me, so I understand that, but we could try that, and then, you know, so that we would be prepared, and you would have some visuals.
How often do those maps change?
Every day?
I was gonna say, that's the issue, is that they change frequently, so.
Yeah, it depends on the information on the map. But yes, it's fair to say, by the time you've printed it, chances are something has already changed.
Okay. All right. Good thought, Commissioner Doster. Any other comments? Questions from commissioners? Okay. The chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of Land Information Services Open Data Policy and the amended Land Information Services Fee Schedule for data and map products.
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Hatfield, support by Getty, to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the Land Information Services Open Data Policy and the amended Land Information Services Fee Schedule for data and map products. Further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you again in a moment, David. Heather Wing. I know you are here somewhere. Come on down. Good morning, Heather. Good to see you again.
I would just like to echo the, Ivan is like the best guy to work with. No offense to anybody else over there, but the maps and stuff that we've needed for the Conservation Easement Board, he has been my hero. The state asks for tons of information that I could not find on my own, and he has been able to get it to me, and rather quickly. So he is right on top of his job.
Awesome. And as we go into these, having 4 new commissioners, I would appreciate the depth of explanation on any of these things we're talking about today.
All righty.
With the MDR grants and the conservation easements, that would be helpful.
Okay, I'm missing the first one that I had on the agenda. Is it the Butler one?
Yes.
Yes. So, last year, the Conservation Easement Board had another grant application process. Once upon a time, when this ordinance started, there was not very much funding from the state of Michigan for conservation easements. Probably the first year that Berry County was eligible to put forward a farm, they were able to preserve the DeGroot farm, I want to say up in like Woodland Township. And that was in 2007. And so we went until 2020 without any state funding to do conservation easements or the preservation of agricultural properties. What happened in the meantime was there were wind turbines erected all over the state of Michigan, and in every one of the parcels that there's a wind turbine, that little piece of property, the roadway that leads to it, and the little square that that wind turbine sits on had to be pulled out of PA 116. So PA 116 is like a tax, it's like a preservation. They call it ag preservation. It's a little different than what I'm here to represent. It's a tax abatement for farmers so that they're not paying all of the school taxes and all of the other stuff. And they get a little bit of a break. They get some of their taxes, their property taxes back, like in the spring when you file your taxes. Well, when you pull property out of PA 116, you have to pay 7 years back taxes on that parcel. And so most of the wind turbines, the acreage that they sit on is between 3 and 10 acres roughly, because they have a setback that for the lane to the turbine and then the square footage that it's on. So 7 years back taxes on 10 acres doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you look at the thousands of wind turbines that are located in the McBain, Gratiot County, and Huron County areas, it's added up to a lot of money. They let that pot sit and brew until 2020. In 2020, they announced that they would be having a grant application cycle where counties in Michigan that had an ag preservation program were eligible to put forth their best farm. We would love to preserve this one. The Carpenter Farm was the first one that we put forward since 2007. They were not accepted at the state level, but they were accepted in the federal funding through the ASEP program, which is something that you would work through the NRCS office. I don't remember all the acronyms. But there's one here, down here by the Farm Service Agency, in the same building the Secretary of State's in. We are still working to close on that farm. The federal guidelines are a whole lot stricter. There's a whole lot more hoops that you have to jump through. The second year we had the Wickham Farm that was approved for the grant competition. And essentially it's Berry County applying for a grant to purchase the development rights of the ag properties that we put forward. So the Wickham Farm was accepted. We'll talk about them next. Last year, my farm was accepted, and then this year the Butler Farm was accepted. So the Butler Farm is immediately contiguous to the Carpenter Farm. It makes about 600 or 700 acres of preserved properties at the northern end of Assyria Township, southern end of Maple Grove Township. I'm really excited about that big parcel because in all of the surveys that we do for Berry County in the master planning process, all of the responses go, we love Berry County's feel. We love the recreation side, we love the ag side, we love the heritage. We're tucked in this little corner. We have, big urban areas around us, and there are some places where we are not going to be able to stop the development because of the way it's rolling. When you look at the townships on the west or the east side of Kent County that butt up against the Caledonia area, that is just a huge steamroller that you just cannot slow down. So it's been fun to look at this. My father-in-law was first appointed to the board, I want to say in 2003. So he spent nearly 20 years, 19-ish, on the board, and it's been an eye-opening experience to get involved with. When Tom was on the Farm Bureau board, he started the process here in Berry County. He went on the land preservation tours out in Maryland to see how their process worked, and was very instrumental in getting the original ordinances written and passed here. So I feel like I'm just picking up where those two left off to try to keep this process rolling. So the grant agreement with the Michigan Agricultural Preservation Program that I brought to you this morning, the Butler Farm was approved on February 14th for funding. That funding level is $604,800. And that will be that's based on like the current land values. We will have an appraisal done just to make sure that the land values are still there and that we're not, wasting the grant funds. Whatever we don't spend goes back to the state. We don't get to keep that. But it's approval for Dave to sign it so that we can keep moving forward. The state will assign the grant number once they get all of the ducks in a row. And our next action will be to put a RFP out for an appraiser to do a 2-tiered appraisal. So they appraise the property in the beginning as its full value, and then they appraise it again, same process, they just look at what development rights are, minus the development rights. So Berry County will own the development rights of this property forever. Someone from the Ag Board or the Conservation Easement Board will annually inspect the property to make sure that it's in its integrity. There are restrictions on what can happen with the property, but pretty much it's always going to have to be agriculture. You cannot subdivide it. It's very hard to split an easement. You can't build 10 houses for your kids on it unless you've already detailed in your conservation easement that this is the area that we're going to allow for, somebody else on the farm to build. You can make some of those, like with our easement, we have excluded like our house and barnyards and stuff because it's really hard to manage the inspections if, well, the last time I was here, this barn was over there. And so we have this little, they call it a building envelope in some of the language and they call it an exclusion in others. But there's about 12 acres there that we can do whatever we want as long as it's agriculture. But if we built like a processing facility for something, that would violate our easement. And so there's some nuances to how you can do things, but you can't sell it for a subdivision. You can't put up a marijuana processing facility. There's a lot of things you can't do, but what you can do is preserve the agricultural heritage that this county has been known for. So I am excited that our farm specifically is 170 this year, and it has always been a farm, and it always will be a farm. And even if my kids decide that they do not want to be farmers, it'll be there for another generation someday. We decided a long time ago we were not going to force our kids to come back if they found a career that made them happy. And so being in that, approaching my twilight years and looking forward towards retirement, we have some decisions on the type of agriculture that's going to happen at our farm. So, but I know that I'll never have to worry about it not being a farm. I will always have that view. The next generation will always have the view, and they will always understand what it's like to live on a farm. I am the 6th generation farmer, besides being married to a 6th generation farmer. And that is a heritage that my children don't know how blessed they are to have. There are not a lot of farmers anymore. 100 years ago, you drive down the road, there's 35 farms before you get to town. I'm the only dairy farm in my mile. There's one other dairy farm in my township. And there used to be probably 200. So we are a dying breed. Less than 2% of the population feeds the rest of the world. And I will always have a little part of that.
Surprising, dairy farming's such an easy business,
Sure.
Early to bed, early to rise, so.
Yeah,
But,
and there's nights where it's not early to bed. Or it's get up in the middle of the night because the cows have come to the house to visit.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That was a very thorough explanation, so I appreciate that. And also, just being a member of the commission for 8 years and seeing what the Conservation Easement Board has turned into in that time is impressive. To see the work that this group is doing and how, at one point, there wasn't a lot of activity because there wasn't a lot to do with it. And really, with Tom Wang and your husband and yourself and some of the people on that board have really taken this bull by the horns, you know, but really driven this forward in the last 3 or 4 years especially. So we appreciate the effort and the preservation aspects because it's a lot of work and energy that it takes to make these things happen, so.
It's not an easy process to understand. I'm still learning. We have a new contractor that we're working with, and he has taken the bull by the horns, and he's schooled me so much on how this process works, and it helps that our farm is involved. I wasn't able to follow the process for the last 2 farms because once it gets into the consultant's hands, the board really is kind of just there to approve things, pass it on to you for approval. And so being on the inside, looking at all of the moving pieces to this, we've got a lot of work to still do, at least on our farm.
Right.
The Wickham farm that'll be up next, they're getting ready. They will have closing documents within the next 30 days.
Wow.
So I will be back here probably in next week and the week after, and the week after that, just to keep that ball rolling so that we can get their award taken care of. So, and then with the Butler farm, everything's just starting. We'll be getting ready for the appraisal and all of the documents with that, and trying to see if we'll work with the same consultant because each project, is a piecemeal for him, and we contract individually on the projects. And then the state has announced that they will probably have double the awards this year. There were only 4 farms last year, and they were not able to award all of the money that they had. They budget about $2 million. They had about $800,000 left. And so they will add that to this year's budget. And they're just, out of 83 counties, there are only 11 that have ag preservation ordinances. And so there's only 11 of us that can apply and only 1 farm from each county. So we've been blessed that the last 3 years our farms have been funded, and we'll see what next year brings. It would definitely make it easier if we had a local funding source that could help. Kent County has an ordinance. Ionia County has an ordinance. There are 4 township ordinances in Washtenaw County as well as a county ordinance. They're not huge millages. They're relatively small, but they help the county purchase these to create the pockets of preserved properties so that we always have that rural feel. One of the other things that I would really love to see is the open space ordinance get funded as well, so that not to compete with Southwest Land Conservancy, but to allow our constituents the opportunity to preserve through the county and not a for-profit agency. I'd love to see more properties around the lakes. We have one in Assyria Township that's city property, but the county is working to help enhance it and make it some more usable. But if we had funding to help preserve some of the other properties that link to that, we could have a water trail through Berry County instead of just the Paul Henry.
Commissioner Campbell, do you have anything you wanted to add?
I guess I sit on the board with Heather, and I certainly do not have all the knowledge of the nuts and bolts of this thing. It is tremendous, a lot of work. Heather does so much of it. But I do know one thing. You can look down the road and they're purchasing property left and right for solar fields. They're purchasing properties for windmills. And I won't live long enough to see the benefits of what we're doing. But Berry County, thank God that we are a county that sees what the future is bringing, and that we're locking up these properties forevermore that nobody can touch, and that'll forever be a representation of Berry County and what we are.
Awesome, thank you. Additional questions from commissioners?
I got a question. Heather, I'm curious about the whole process. You know, my family owns land, but, do you guys still get to do what you want to on that land as far as farming it? And-
Yes, you still can do everything, through the generally accepted management practices of agriculture. You can still spread manure, you can still plant corn. You cannot let like a woodlot grow up on it. You have to maintain it.
Yeah.
If you have trees, you can log stuff, not commercially, but if you work with a forester, you can cut trees to sell. You can cut your firewood. You can put up fence rows. There are a lot of things that you can do, but it has to be a farm. You can't split it off and make a subdivision out of it. You can change, like when you decide to sell your property, you can still sell your property, the county will still own the development rights. So even with in 100 years when it gets sold, it would be very, very difficult to get those development rights back, and you would have to pay for them, and it would almost take like an act of Congress or the Supreme Court to get that cleared.
That's what I was curious about, whether or not you could still sell it, but it would
You
have to
can still sell
maintain,
it.
be agricultural.
Yep.
Okay.
There is a case out of Grand Traverse County where someone conserved their property and then tried to split it, and they were advised that they weren't able to. It went through appeals, and the appeals court did issue a statement, and I'm not sure that's the right word for it, as to make it precedent setting that, hey, we want everybody to know that once you do this, there's no backing out. And they were in it to make the money off of the grant and then make the money off the development. So I do know of another property in Calhoun County that was preserved, that was sold, and a developer just snatched it up and didn't do his research and wanted to turn it into a subdivision and then found out he couldn't. So now he's stuck with a pretty expensive 40-acre field.
Beautiful. Commissioner Getty.
So I did have a question about how, what that process would be if somebody wanted to pull that back out of the conservation easement. And
it's a big
we
process.
answered that. But also just to support the vision, because we are a county that's nestled in between interstates, between metropolitan areas, and the value of our county lies in our agricultural base and our recreation. And so I applaud you for the work, because it hasn't been easy, I know.
No, it has been an uphill battle ever since I got involved with the board. So I think the perseverance of my father-in-law, Paul, to stick with it all those years, Larry Neal, and Joanne Bossard Schroeder are the long-serving members. We dragged Bob Vanderboe in a few years ago, and we got stuck throwing straw bales at the Kids' Day at Charlton Park. We had an information trailer down here for Summerfest. We did a lot of things other than preserve farmland, and I'm really happy that the state's to this point, and that we were eligible to, I guess, hit the ground running when they finally had funding. So.
Awesome.
But it's multiple generations down the road that are going to see the value of the work that you've done. Assyria Township isn't, not necessarily, development isn't beating down the door in Assyria Township, but multiple generations down the road, it's through the work that you're doing now.
There is not a township in Berry County that has not seen new construction permits. And so you see the higher numbers around Thornapple Township, Middleville, Hastings, but even Assyria Township, we are probably the smallest quadrant, but we still have had our building permits. We've had young families move in with their little micro farms, wanting to do stuff for the farmers market, and that's exciting. But at the same time, those of us who are privileged enough to have ag properties, it has been a huge responsibility for all of these years. In the 50s, the statistics were each farm fed 50 families. Now each farm is feeding 150 families, because there are so many less of us than there used to be. So it's a big...
Commissioner Smelker, our resident farmer.
I have nothing. Thank you, Heather, for doing the work on this.
Additional questions?
Yes, Oh, Ms.
Joel?
Very quick question. Does that protect, a friend of mine's in Delton, there's gravel mines everywhere out there, proposed and whatnot. Would that protect gravel mining operation?
It would prohibit, it would prohibit any surface mining, any exploration, gas stuff, all of that. It prohibits all of that. It would not prohibit you from putting in a central pivot to irrigate your property.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I had a question. So what criteria do they look at then? What does the farm present in order to place a bid?
So, we announce usually the end of May, 1st of June, the application cycle. The farm or the farm or the farm families fill out a questionnaire. There's 11 different criteria that we look at. We look at meat verification, we look at agricultural productivity, we look to see if there's other like value added on the farm. So dairy farms definitely score higher because there's multiple things going on. I have a dairy, I raise grain, I do more things, I have higher gross receipts. They look, what are the special historical aspects of the farm? Our farm is certified sesquicentennial. So there are other farms that, you know, don't have active dairy farms anymore, but they just rent out their land. They look to see, the farm gets points for if it's contiguous to another preserved property. The Wickham, not the Wickham farm. There was another farm in the application process that got points because they are right next to Charlton Park. Charlton Park's kind of preserved. And so like the Butler farm, they got more points because they are contiguous to the Carpenter farm. And while they are not done with their preservation process, it's just a matter of time until they are. So there's a lot of things. The number of acres that are being preserved. Our farm, we have 434 acres that will be preserved. The Butler farm is, I think, 287. The Wickham farm was a little bit smaller, and the Carpenter farm was just about 400. So it's these big parcels, not the smallest one that we look at is 40 acres, and it has to be 50% or more tillable. So like my father-in-law has 70 acres. There's only 30 acres that are tillable. He's not quite to 50%. So he would have to probably preserve that under an open space agreement because he's more open space, green space than he is agricultural.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Any further discussion? The chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the grant draft agreement between the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development in Berry County for the Susan K. Butler Farm and authorize the chair to sign the final agreement.
So moved. Calton.
Support that, Campbell.
Motion by Calton, support by Campbell, to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the grant draft agreement between the Michigan Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, and Berry County for the Susan K. Butler Farm and authorize the chairperson to sign the final agreement. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Board, are you okay continuing? Anybody need a break?
Yes, I do.
Can we get through this last one? You want to take a break right now?
Get
All right,
through
let's
the-
get through the other
Wickham?
part of Heather. Yeah, through Wickham. Continue.
Did you want to read the?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. So, in your packet that you received last week, the agricultural land easement purchase agreement and the conservation easement, there was some misinformation in that, so I emailed Luella the changes. This has to do with the Wickham property. On November 17th, 2020, the Berry County Board of Commissioners authorized the Conservation Easement Board to submit their grant, and they were awarded the grant number there in February of 21, $130,000 for the purchase of their development rights. The Wickhams are donating the other $130,000 for their development rights. They had donated 50% of their development rights to the county. And so we are finally to that process where you have the draft conservation easement, and it lists in there all the legalese and who's the grantee and grantor and all of the stuff that they can do and can't do. This will travel with their deed forever. So when somebody does a title search for this property, this easement will pop up. So we recently did a title search for our farm, and guess what? My husband's grandpa sold off a lot of gas and oil leases, and I am gonna have to clear every single one of them. There are over 17. So, and each one of those will have to be filed, and so, but what pops up is all of your mortgages, all of your everything. And so this will always travel with the title of the land, and so whenever somebody does a title commitment search, they will say, oh, it's conserved. So there'll be no, I didn't know about it, unless they just don't read their documents. The other one is the purchase agreement, and both of these documents have been through county legal, and that's why you got this new one, is because the attorney had something he wanted changed, and they made the switch, and I didn't know about it until like Monday.
Yep.
So this includes the purchase price, and it's a pretty straightforward purchase agreement. And I don't usually buy properties. That was one of the attracting factors of my husband, is he lived on the family farm, and it's been there 170 years. Well, I came at 150, so. But
Questions for Heather? John?
Berry County has received $130,000.
I am not sure about that. I'm sure that we will find out shortly. It will be like an electronic transfer, and the funds won't transfer until the closing day.
Okay.
So,
That would be normal.
yeah. We'll probably do the closing here at Titan, take pictures, and drag David in to sign stuff.
Now, I guess, do we wait to get the 130, or do we write the check and then get reimbursed?
I think you'll get the money first. So, Barry Lonick is our consultant. He is located in Dexter, and he has done this for 30 years in Washtenaw County, and so he is walking me through the process. He wanted me to come and just get all the authorization of funds, and I said, no, I think I need to walk through this process a little bit slower. And I said, we can go back in 2 weeks and just make sure we have all of our ducks in a row before we go to the commissioners and have to wait on something. So I would much rather walk through this process so I know how the next two are gonna go, so that we do it right. And it's an education process, because I have at least 3 commissioners here that are totally not exposed to this, so.
And we'll dig into that a little bit with Luella as well, so.
Yeah,
And
and
Michael.
I may ask the same question next week.
It's all good. I'll be here. And I'll get with my consultant to see how that process works and what that timeframe's gonna be. I just needed to get this stuff approved before we move forward and then have somebody be, I'm gonna vote no, because I didn't have an opportunity to look at it.
Additional questions for Heather? The chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the purchase agreement and conservation easement between Berry County and James and Barbara Wickham for the property located at Carlton Township, and authorize the chair to sign it.
So moved.
Motion by Smelker, support by Hatfield, to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the purchase agreement and conservation easement between Berry County and James and Barbara Wickham for the property located in Carlton Township, and authorize the chair to sign it. Additional comments or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.
The board is going to take a 10-minute recess. We'll be back at 10:20 or thereabouts.
Thank you.
I had a feeling.
So did I.
It gave me the opportunity, it came, so I. Oh, man.
Do you want to sponsor the motion to, make the county gun protected zone? I think you should be the person.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's it. Move the ladder.
Oh, yeah.
Next up, David Shinbar. GIS job description. Good morning, David.
Good morning. Well, for those of you who may not heard the unpleasantness of my world, the IT GIS deputy has resigned as of Friday of this week. So, with that being said, I would like to obviously kind of move things along with getting a replacement, and in looking at his position, or the job description for the IT GIS Deputy Director. This agenda request is to loosen up a couple of the qualifications so I can maybe see a bigger pool of applicants. Specifically, dialing it down from bachelor's degree required to associate's degree required. And then also there was a certification that's required, and I would like to make that preferred. Those are the two changes. And then going forward, it's highly unlikely that any hiring or even interviewing is going to take place until Michael gets back. But this at least kind of gets me a foothold, gets me started in advertising the position and seeing what's out there.
Awesome. Questions from commissioners? I've read through this in detail, David. I do not see an effort, because you're basically just saying that a bachelor's degree is preferred but not required.
Correct.
That's one of the only changes. That gives you a little more leeway. We know hiring has been an issue across several county departments right now, so we want to be sure we get the best candidates and open all opportunities possible to make that happen. So I would support this. Additional questions from commissioners?
I would also just like to mention that our help desk person is out on extended leave as well, for maybe up to a month. So not making any excuses or anything, but response times may be just down a tick in the next couple of weeks. We'll do the best we can. So.
Awesome. The chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the attached revised job description for IT/GIS Deputy Director position.
So moved.
Support, Doster.
Motion by Hatfield, support by Doster, to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the attached revised job description for the IT/GIS Deputy Director position. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next on our agenda, ad hoc committee facilities update. There has been a lot going on. As several of you remember, last year there was a lot of chatter and a lot of information, a lot of questions about county facilities. That was one of the things we wanted to address this year. And we wanted to address it quickly and kind of move the needle on some of these things if possible. Some of it has moved quicker than I anticipated. David, would you put up the picture up in front of the court building? So I'm going to start with the front of the court building. I've toured, that's the new front of the court building. There we go. But the front of the court building has got great bones. I've toured it a couple times now. I've continued to talk with Michael about a plan for that building. There will be some motion on this going forward. I will tell you that we did reach out because in both tours, the thing that came up is the windows in this building are extremely old, and they need to be replaced and updated. The quote came back from a local vendor at around $94,000, which we thought was extremely reasonable. I thought that was gonna be substantially higher than that. We do have that on hold at the time being, only because before we spend any more money on this building, I wanna get a concrete plan on what we're gonna do with the building. So we're gonna continue those discussions. We're gonna evaluate county departments, see if there are fits as far as what would fit in that building and how to best utilize that resource. There also may be an opportunity to use some of that for incubator space, for businesses or startups, for some other things. We haven't taken anything off the table right now. Oh, thank you. We know that there will be, obviously, the addition of the lofts going in right behind that. So there's an opportunity for us to kind of rethink what we're going to do with this building going forward. So at this point, there is not a definitive direction for it, other than to give you an update on the fact that we are going to potentially move some county offices into that building eventually when we get through that discussion. So, and both John Smelker and Bruce Campbell, sit on that facilities ad hoc committee. Dave Hatfield, working with the city, has also been very instrumental just in helping us get through some of that and envision some of that as well. So, questions on front of the court? Okay, David, next slides. Unbeknownst to me, for most of my 8 years as a commissioner, the county owns a piece of property on Jefferson Street, about a block off of the main road there, Jefferson and Chestnut. We have a garage on there, and it's a pretty big parking area. You can see the condition of the pavement there is rapidly deteriorating. And if you look there, right now, we have several vehicles that are not county-owned, including a trailer. The neighborhood has begun to use that as excess parking area for whatever happens to end up in there. Courts and Law is currently using this. You can go to the next slide, David. Courts and Law is using this garage to park some vehicles. There's also, I think the Drain Commissioner has a little bit of stuff in there, and Emergency Management has a little bit of stuff in there. As we've toured this a couple times and looked at this structure, it doesn't seem to really fit with what we need, and I'm more concerned about the liability that the county has with all of the extra parking and curricular activities going on in this parking lot. I also think that there are apartments adjoining this lot. This may be a really good spot to just repurpose into housing, which, as we know, is needed in the county. So it is my recommendation and the recommendation of the ad hoc committee that county administration, Michael Brown, get an appraisal on this property, and we start thinking about revisioning this. Yes, sir.
Just wanted to let you know it's Jefferson and Walnut.
Jefferson and Walnut, okay. Okay. I know it was some nut, I just couldn't remember what it was, so, But, all right, thank you. Thank you. So that is our recommendation. I don't think we need a motion on that. Michael has approval to expend, I think, up to $5,000 on things like appraisals like that. So if there is a consensus with the board to move forward with that and kind of see what the value of that property is, I think this would be a good time to do that.
Absolutely.
Yep. Support.
Okay. We will move forward with that. Next up is community mental health. I did not have the opportunity to take pictures of that facility. I think, how many of you have had a chance to tour that building? I know Commissioner Tunison's been out there, Commissioner Hatfield's been out there, so several of you have seen that facility out there. It's a 1990s building. It's about, I believe, around 7,500 square feet. It sits on 22 acres. It's got very good bones. It's a brick structure. Community mental health, I think, moved out of that facility completely last fall. So that kind of came on our radar last fall. There's an appraisal that was done last year in the $750,000 range for it. Talking to some local realtors and some people involved in commercial real estate, the value may be a little higher on that building. The issue is it's very dated. The other issue is it's a beautiful structure, but it is, oh, there we go, Land Information Services to the rescue. It is way off the beating path for a commercial use for a doctor's office or a dentist office or something like that, and it's a pretty big structure. So
We have looked at purposes for that, including, we've had the COA, Commission on Aging, tour that facility to see if that would fit their needs. We've also had the YMCA, who asked to take a look at that. We've had some training, and I don't know if it was from the Sheriff's Department that wanted to use that, or I know one group was talking about using that for some training as well in there. So we've had several interested parties in that building. In the end, having the COA tour it, they like the building, and they like the square footage, and they like the openness of the 22 acres and the possibilities for it. However, driving there on the roads in the winter out to Algonquin Lake, it just wasn't a good fit for what they were looking for at that point. So we had that discussion back and forth with them. That opened the door for us to kind of think about how we could repurpose it. And at the same time, John Spores, who's with us this morning, and Scott from the YMCA approached us about touring that facility, and they have since then taken several looks at that facility. And after some discussion with Michael, some discussion with them, and with the ad hoc committee, we like what their vision is for that. John, do you have a second? Is John here? Okay, there he is. But one of the things that we need in Berry County, come on up. One of the things we need in Berry County is childcare. And I didn't realize how much the YMCA was involved in having a pretty broad-based child care program, as well as services for youth in the area as well. So I don't know if you want to expound upon some of that.
Thank you for the time today. John Spohr, CEO of the YMCA. As you can tell on the map, our YMCA property is the next 35-acre parcel to the east. So this property does align right with the Y property. Our day camp numbers on the lakeside are full. They've been full for many summers. Our child care facilities around town are growing. There's obviously emerging community needs for youth services. That is our main driving focus for our program model. Our board and our committees have pushed through a strategic plan recently, a camp master plan, and this property and this building completely aligns with both. So it's something that we're very interested in and happy to work with the county in whichever process they determine is the best fit.
And talking with Michael in detail about this, we've talked about RFPs, we've talked about listing with the realtor. Realtor fees can run 7 to 10% on something like this. We think when we look at this, if we were going to put together an RFP for this property, what we would want is something that could enhance our community, especially something that would check some of the boxes, especially with child care services. I feel that with the YMCA having a footprint out there already, this fits in with what's already been going on in Algonquin Lake and the services being provided. Some of the land is low. I don't think it would necessarily be good for retail or residential development. And I think the goal, at least our thought with this is, if we have a consensus on the board, is that county administration formally get together with the YMCA about the potential purchase of that property and kind of sharing a detailed vision with the board at some point in the future with what that could be, what that could be for the county. So I don't know that we necessarily need a motion for that, but everything that is discussed with county administration as far as a formal buy-sell agreement, if it comes to that, would have to be approved by this board anyways. It's got to come back to this board, but it was a recommendation of the ad hoc committee that we proceed with that because we think this is a great fit with the YMCA having a footprint and what they can do to enhance the community with child care and youth services out there. Questions for John?
John and I talked.
Oops. Go ahead.
And, of course, knowing me, I thought it was worth more, but I believe the YMCA is the best fit for it.
Okay. Commissioner Getty?
I would love to see some kind of public recreational trail or something. That there's a lot of residents around Algonquin Lake, and maybe there would be some opportunity there for just a walking, hiking path.
Absolutely.
Okay. Additional comments?
I think it's a great fit, right next door, and they can utilize it and benefit the county too, residents.
Absolutely.
I also agree that the roads out there were not a good fit for COA, and for people to drive to. And what is that, Aquinas Trail?
Yeah.
And Beeler's Dirt coming the other way. That's on the corner of Aquinas and Beeler, so.
That was probably the biggest drawback, I think, that they felt, the COA. It was just too far out in the roads in the wintertime.
I was privileged to drive them one day after a snowstorm, and it was entertaining. So, you know, it was a little more entertaining. So with that, if it's the consensus of the board, then we will give Michael the blessing to go ahead and have a formal sit-down with the YMCA and discuss further negotiations and see if we can make that dream a reality.
Could I add one comment?
Yes, sir.
That it might behoove us to look at the deed to make sure there wasn't a restrictive covenant on it for specifically granted to the county for county purposes or something, you know.
Good thought, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you, John.
All right, thank you.
Next up, Commission on Aging. David, would you pull up, since you're impressing me with your land information skills, would you pull up Harvest Point in that area out there with Thornapple? Being on the board for approximately 8 years now, one of the things that has constantly come before this board is the issues that we're having with the Commission on Aging building. Some of those conversations have been pleasant, some of them have been interesting, right, Sharon? So, you know, it's been a long issue that we've known that the Commission on Aging building has had issues. And as I was in there a few weeks ago and noticed that there is no much of a ceiling left in the men's bathroom, it's just all apparent on exactly how that building is structured, and something needed to be done. But long story short, when the Commission on Aging had the opportunity to tour the community mental health facility, and they started looking at the size of the building and what they could do with the 7,500 square foot building, we started sitting down and talking to Michael about the size of the building and also the location of the building. And what came up with those conversations was that the COA, at one point we were talking about a 20 or 25,000 square foot building, but with some creative visioning and them looking at that facility, they thought they could do with less square footage, especially if we really visioned what the needs are going to be for seniors going forward. That led us to a conversation, because probably as long as I've been a commissioner, there's also been conversation about why isn't the Commission on Aging involved more or engaged with Thornapple? Well, the two are totally separate entities, and we want to keep those identities separate. But we sat down with Rebecca DeHaan, who is now the executive director out at Thornapple and Harvest Point, and started asking questions about the possibility of shared resources for their facility at Harvest Point and some of the things they're doing out there and some of the property that the county owns, as you can see on the map up there now. And I was amazed at the vision Rebecca has going forward for creating a very senior-centric area out there with trails and pickleball courts and recreation and lots of things that would happen, and her enthusiasm for sharing those resources with the Commission on Aging, which further helped us with the conversation of how big of a building do we need if we have these buildings that can be shared, if those resources could be worked together. Had sat down with Corey Zinni, the executive director at Commission on Aging. Rebecca and Courtney got together, had some more, we did some tours, sat down with the Commission on Aging board. We had some concerns that there might be some resistance about moving it a little further on the edge of town on 179 out in this location. But the Commission on Aging board was extremely enthusiastic about the potential of having a new facility out there. The issue is going to be financing. When we sat down with Michael, talked about money, he put together a plan that basically said that we can take about $3 million of county resources, cash assets, and we can turn those into about a 10,000 square foot building. That we could build a brand-new building for the Commission on Aging on the property out here that the county already owns, brand new, using the vision of Rebecca and Courtney and what the vision for seniors are in the county going forward, and collaborating those resources. One of the main things that really stood out was that we have a Meals on Wheels program right now, which I'm going by memory, but I think is in the 750 or 800,000 range as an expense every year. Harvest Point has by far one of the most amazing kitchens that I've seen in the county. I mean, it is a phenomenal facility. It was built with a lot of thought and a lot of vision. I believe instead of getting our Meals on Wheels out of Kent County, there's an opportunity for collaboration with Harvest Point to do our Meals on Wheels in-house to provide better food. We've got a lot of space out there. It's possible to create a farm-to-table environment out there where we can do some really amazing things for our seniors, increase the quality of the meals at a cost-effective point as well, and do it all in-house. So obviously this is a vision, and some of the things we're working through, this hasn't all been put on contracts or I's or T's dotted, but I think we have an opportunity to create a very senior-centric area out there going forward that will attract seniors to this community, because not only is it going to be assisted living, but there's the potential for senior living, you know, additional. So we can create some of that space out there and really create a gem for Berry County out there. So this is what we've been designing. It also, I know it's been discussed, is that there's an opportunity for the Commission on Aging to rethink, because some people have said, well, there's a lot of us, I'll be 60 this year, and I know I don't look a day over 40, but, you know, I'll be 60 this year, and, you know, I'm not thinking about the Commission on Aging, because it's something that, I don't know if it's the word or the term, but seniors today are more active, more independent, and I think it gives us a chance to rebrand and revision what we want our Commission on Aging to look like in the future. And I think that collaboration between the Commission on Aging, between Rebecca DeHaan, putting some great minds together with some new leadership in the county, I think we've got an outstanding opportunity to really build something amazing here. So I really appreciate Rebecca DeHaan and your input and your insight and your willingness to spend some time touring and answering questions, and Courtney for your open-minded to listen to us, and the entire COA board. It's been a process. I also think going forward that when you look at the current location of where the Commission on Aging building is, that gives us a chance to repurpose that area. There is also apartments in that area. So as we have an additional need for housing, I think that would be a great area at some point to go forward and look at that as a partnership with the city in building some additional housing resources up there as well. So it's a win-win-win situation. With the boards we've talked to, it's been very well received. I think we've got some very good things going forward in there. Rebecca, did you have any comments?
I don't, just looking forward.
Okay. Courtney, I don't know if you had any comments or insight you wanted to share or add with the board at this point?
I just have a comment that I think the COA really appreciates the acknowledgement of the board, the importance of where we're at and where we need to be or should be for our seniors, and also the representation that the board had at our meeting to present this idea to my work. It really showed a lot. You know, there's been issues in the past, prior to me, prior to many of you, about our board and the commissioners not necessarily seeing eye to eye. So I think to be able to present something that everyone could get behind, and to be able to have the opportunity to collaborate with another county entity, I think it's just an amazing opportunity for everyone, but especially for our seniors.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you. If you haven't had a chance to take a tour of Harvest Point, I would really encourage you to do that. It's a beautiful facility. And when you see the kitchen in the area and the layout, I think the potential is amazing. Our goal with this is to keep the identity of the Commission on Aging, or whatever they decide they want to rebrand into. I foresee them having their own entrance off 179, so it'll be easier for seniors to get from the city, from Nashville, from Delton, into Middleville, into that area. So they'll have their own entrance. If we can put it together right, the two buildings can be close together, so it'll be very efficient for the Meals on Wheels and the collaboration of space between the two buildings. So there are some very good things going forward, and I thank Commissioner Colton, Commissioner Smelker, Commissioner Hatfield, Commissioner Tunison for your input on that. This has been a process, like I said, that's been 8 years in the making. It hasn't been something that's happened just overnight, but it's been something that when your chair is somewhat ADD, I think about things like this and we try to move things along, and I like to make things happen. So hopefully we can continue this process and move forward. So really good, I think it's really good news. And at some point in the future, we'll have a motion that allocates those funds for that building. We're in the very beginning stages of that at this point, but I see that with the COA board doing the visioning as far as where they want to go forward, and working with Harvest Point, and probably setting up a steering committee comprised of some commissioners, some people from COA, some people from Harvest Point, so we can consolidate that vision and be sure that the structure, the new building works for everybody involved in it, that'll be a process moving forward. But the win is for taxpayers when we can take something like this and do this, and we can do it with funds that we've already set aside from the county, using Michael and Luella's, county administration and brilliance to make it happen. It's something that has needed to happen for a long time, and I'm excited to think that we can move this forward. So, questions or comments from commissioners?
I just want to say, this is what is possible when people start working together. And I think the vision of our chair and vice chair to sit down, everybody together, begin with, and move this forward. And then when we sat down with the board, it's just a great thing for the community, I think.
Thank you, Commissioner Tunison.
I'm excited about so many elements of this. The cooperation between COA and Harvest Point, I think, is extraordinarily exciting and lets us maximize the utilization of the facilities out there, both in terms of the kitchen as well as some of the meeting rooms, as well as some of the recreational activities that are to come. I'm also very pleased that we've identified a couple of our sites, particularly the Jefferson and Walnut property, as well as the old COA property, as areas where we potentially could see some additional residential development because of the city's success with the Lofts project, as well as the significant community joint efforts with the Community Foundation and others to create housing. We've got an inordinate amount of interest from developers right now that are looking for the right location to do another project here. So we may have some answers to that.
Fantastic. Commissioner Colton.
This breakthrough has been a real paradigm shift in the conversation about the future building for the COA. For years, decades, we've been talking about a millage to build a new building, but this pushes way past that, and it's almost like the solution's been there in front of our eyes maybe for years, but with now the new structures being built, it's made this possible, and it's exciting to see this.
Absolutely. Additional comments? Thank you. Joel? How did I know you would have a comment?
To Mike Colton's point, I think that a lot is owed to Don Haney for being the brainstorm behind the Harvest Point facility to begin with. I personally am excited about the change of events, things I think that we see moving in a very, very positive manner. I think you're going to have the support of the public, unlike what you've ever seen, as well as getting rid of some properties that the county has not utilized. It gets rid of potential liabilities as well. I am very excited. My only thing, if I was able to make a motion, would be, I personally think that the COA with some holes drilled in the roof would make a perfect building for the health department.
Remind me not to invite you to speak again, son. But- Okay, finally, we have our jail. Jail is a mandated service that we have to provide for the county. After this conversation about the Commission on Aging and being able to fund that, we have sat down and continue to have conversations with county administration about possible funds for that. And I think we've identified somewhere between $3 to $5 million that the county is going to be able to put up in cash as far as towards that building. I know we were talking at one point about a $25 million building. Later on in this year, we're going to either do an RFP or talk to some developers about both location and the scope of building. But I do not think with our average county population now running in the low 50s, if it's still that, Undersheriff?
For the average, yes, it always depends on what the state allows as well as what the Justice Society put in.
Okay, that we can rethink that facility, save the taxpayer some money at the same time, put a facility up that will be expandable as we need it going forward. So we're going to put a lot of vision and thinking into this. There'll be more coming out on this in the future, but it is definitely on our radar as something that we need to address this year and move forward with, using some county funds, some ARPA funds. I think we've got an opportunity to really move the needle on several projects this year, and I appreciate the cooperation of the board, people willing to work together, work with us and help in that process. So there'll be more coming on that as well. So with that, I am done with the ad hoc committee facilities update unless Commissioner Smelker or Commissioner Campbell would like to add anything to that.
I would just like to add one thing. Spending most of my life in a coaching position of some sort my whole life, I've grown accustomed to the word team, and it really feels good that our county is becoming a team. It really feels good.
Commissioner Smelker.
We have talked about this for years. And I am so excited that we are getting things started to move. And I want to thank David for getting behind us and pushing. And I am going to do my best to make you look 60 instead of 40 before year's up.
You got a good start. Commissioner Hatfield?
I don't really have much to add. Other than the fact that as one of the newbies on the commission, came here knowing that we had some significant issues that we were going to have to address, and I'm very pleased that this is a great group to work with, and we're seeing some movement that was badly needed.
Additional commissioner comments?
We have
Awesome.
public comment?
Oops. Go ahead.
I didn't know if we had moved on
Oh,
to commissioner comments
no,
or if
not
we're
yet.
in public comment.
With no comments, we will move on to public comment. At this time, any member of the public wishing to address the board may do so for up to 3 minutes. Only give Joel 2.5 though, so.
I won't bring up the health department. For the jail, and this is my public comment, but oh well. I have a lot that I'd like to add to that. Back in 2018, Sheriff Leaf allowed me the pleasure of shadowing a correctional officer for a day, and that was very eye-opening. I asked him after that if he would book me for a day, and he refused. But
Let's see if he won't reconsider.
we'll ask. Maybe with the board's vote, I could be. But Tower Pinkster did an absolutely disastrous job at portraying the need for a new jail. There's a lot of things to take into consideration. One, it is something that we as a county are required to do by law, and it seems like all the facilities that we're not required to do are beautiful, big, and great, and yet the jail is a dump. you have to chew the air before you swallow in there. When I was in there, things were just in beyond disrepair in the sense that things were ripped off of the wall from people who were in their max cell. The fact that there is no separation of if you have a female inmate charged with a violent crime and someone who was picked up for a drug-related crime. Those two people are together. We don't have the ability to separate those. That in and of itself should be an atrocity that everyone here should be, okay, let's figure out a 911 plan to get this straightened out. You have the different lock sets, which, I mean, you have to carry keys to, that were designed, old brass keys like you see in the Looney Tunes cartoons back in the 40s. They're still using those. And then you have an addition that was put on in, the 60s, an addition that was put on, in the 70s and 80s. So all the magnetic locks, there's one lock there that they have a rope tied to the door handle to keep the door open so it doesn't lock behind you, because the wiring to the electromagnetic lock doesn't work anymore. Someone actually would have to open that door in order to, there's a terrible amount of problems there. And something else to keep in consideration, not everyone housed in that jail is guilty of a crime. There are people that are arrested who are not guilty that wind up spending the night in jail until the courts and everything can figure out the problem and, oh, I guess it was so-and-so, not this person. Those are huge issues, not to mention the working environments that the correctional officers have to put up with. And I'm going to tell you right now, they don't pay near enough for me to want to work in that situation. Just the air quality that you have to breathe alone. So I think that if you're going to accelerate any project, I really hope that this is one project that you do, and I would like to be a part of that, because I do think that, there's a front page article in the banner that explains my thoughts on how it was handled last time. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Additional public comment?
Hello, Chuck Hertzler, City of Hastings. You guys are doing a tremendous job. I am totally impressed and happy with you guys. The one thing that I would like to see, if it's all possible, is an update on what's happening with the ARPA funds that have already been issued. How are the projects going? How are things proceeding? You know, we got the 911 part, we got the Blue Zones part, we got the Paul Henry Trail part. There's a lot of money given out, and people would like to know what's happening, because we're not seeing anything. So if somewhere in the near future, if you could bring up a brief presentation to say, okay, this is what's going on, and this percent, how much percentage of this is done, what have you, I think the people would like to see that.
Good thought.
Other than that, I have no complaints or concerns right now, other than my own personal things at home. But all right, thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
Under Sheriff Jason Sixbury and I obviously agree with lots of different comments that's happened today and everything, with especially about our facility. I'm not here to continue to say that right now, but we do need a new facility, and it would have been better if we would have had it taken care of years before, because it would have been a lot cheaper. But definitely for the deputies' sakes, correction as well as law enforcement, it would behoove us to try to start moving forward with a new facility for the county for the jail.
Thank you. Additional public comment?
Sounds great. Cindy Twitchell, Prairieville Township, and as I left off with our 234-year-old Constitution and how several other countries have had far more than that in such a shorter period of time, it shows the exceptionalism, I believe, of our nation and the Constitution that was given to us. But it's not an arrogant statement I'm making, because in 1831, Frenchman Alexis de Tocqueville traveled to the United States to discover what made America so different. After traveling across America for several months, he wrote how the condition of America was the exception to the rule. This became known as American exceptionalism. which is simply to say that America is not like any other nation. She truly is extraordinary, meaning extraordinary or not ordinary, not in the means. But why? If we are to study American system of government, we must study what made this system so unique and produce such unique results. What caused the United States of America to become the most free, most powerful, and most benevolent nation in the history of the world. Each week I'm going to, and I hope to, share with you the amazing history and truth of our great country. Amazingly enough, this is not being taught in our public schools today. I can't help to think the reason why is because knowledge is power. And those in control today do not want to lose their power, so they do not want to educate those they have power over. As John Basil Barnhill wrote in his series of debates on socialism, which were published in 1914, where the people fear the government, you have tyranny. Where the government fears the people, you have liberty. And I do also want to say, and say ditto on what people are saying. 2 years ago, coming into these chambers was stressful. I did not look forward to it. I don't have that feeling today. I feel we're being listened to, and that's all we want. Not only just listened to, but we're taking our thoughts. You're taking our thoughts to consideration. That is greatly appreciated. We the people, again, as I said back a couple of months ago, we are your boss. You work for us. You work for we the people. And I want to say you're doing a wonderful job. I am the type of person, you can ask my children, when they did good, I commended them and praised them. When they did wrong, I let them know and corrected them. That's the type of person I am. I want you to do the same for me, though. Okay? I expect that from other people. Hold me accountable also. If I can make one quick motion as a citizen, I make the motion that you approve those raises for those part-time employees that was put in January. The part-timers are the ones a lot of times forgotten, and make it retroactive to when the request was put in. That's my motion as a citizen.
Thank you, Cindy. Additional public comment?
Is she public?
Yeah, I didn't talk.
He's public now.
Heather Wing, Assyria Township. Kudos for the stress, the perseverance to overcome the last 2 years that I have not been with you. There have been a lot of challenges, and you have weathered that storm quite nicely. I would like to echo the sentiments in the urgency to find a new jail. Having been part of the process to start Harvest Point and being privy to the vision of consolidated senior services out there, I'm beyond excited for the opportunities that we have with that parcel and the other things going on here in town. Not all the right players were in that game 4 years ago when that process started, but they are now. So keep up the good work. I'll be here to pat you on the back and push you along. So your job's not done. Just because you get a paycheck doesn't mean you're done. I have lots of work to do with my project, and I'm eager to watch you get yours done. So thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Additional public comment?
Sharon Zabrowski, again. I want to thank you for working together. And I think, as somebody said, the COA solution was there a long time ago. I think there was a reason that it had to come now. At that point, I don't think that the two sides, Thornapple Manor or COA, were willing to work together for whatever reason. We needed a time when we were willing to work together. where we could see the vision. And maybe that was, sometimes we need new blood, new people to come along and kind of nudge us a little bit. But I also want to tell our chair, I probably won't be kicking you in the ankles about COA anymore, but don't think I'm going away. I have other issues too. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Additional public comment?
I'm Terry Dennison from the COA, and I have to thank you, commissioners, for making my dream come true. This is something I've been wanting for since I've been on the board way back in 2002. And I'm just delighted. And when you came to our meeting last month, I had so many emotions at that time. I think it was grinning from ear to ear. I had tears in my eyes for joy. I mean, it was just a wonderful, wonderful meeting. And then we took the tour out at Harvest Point, and it's going to be a great spot for us. And having a wonderful kitchen, and I'm just delighted. And so thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
And thank you for your 20 years of service with the Commission on Aging. So, additional public comment? Hearing none, we will move to commissioner comments. Commissioner Tunison.
Well, speaking of Sharon Zabrowski, you're right. Don't ever stop going away, okay? I appreciate you. Well, last week, it's something, seeing as how I'm new, I didn't realize that there was a compensation committee, and she mentioned that some pretty dedicated people were left out of the process, and I just wanted to mention the fact that I need to understand it better myself, so I just, maybe you can explain it to me, Mr. Chair, sometime.
Okay.
But
Commissioner Campbell?
From a coach's perspective, 3 words: together we can.
Vice Chair Hatfield.
Just a brief comment. Attended the County Planning Commission meeting last week. We're in the process of doing the final edits on the master plan. I am extraordinarily impressed with what's been put together there and encourage you all to spend some time with it as soon as it gets in your hands, which will be fairly soon.
Fantastic. Commissioner Doster.
Nothing further.
Commissioner Colton. Commissioner Getty.
I also attended the County Planning Commission meeting. They've done a very nice job, a lot of work, and really updating that document and including all the communities around the county, the ones they do planning for, the ones they don't. I think it's just going to be a great resource for all the townships, cities, and the city and villages.
Commissioner Smelker.
Just a comment on ARPA funds for 911. The Tower 2 is going to go up in the village of Middleville at the wastewater treatment facility. And Tower 2 will probably go up before Tower 1 because we thought an ideal spot for Tower 1 and the FAA put a next to it because it's in a flight plan of one of the runways. So we do think we have another spot for Tower 1, and we're moving forward with that. We were going to put it right at 911, but that seems to be built in a hole. It's 200 feet different than the city of Hastings. So we are moving forward, and there has been some money spent as a down payment on the towers. Can't remember exactly what it was, but I think it's around $1 million.
Okay. Just a few follow-up comments. I know there were a couple comments on the health department, and I can't remember. I know Heather was a part of that, but it was 2018 when we did the ad hoc committee review, or 19, when they went out and talked to several other county health departments. And the recommendation when they were looking at what we were doing and what they were doing was to continue what we were doing. It's also extremely expensive to break away because the state oversight is more in favor of consolidated health departments and expanding that consolidation like District 10 versus individual health departments, so it would be very expensive to do so. I know Commissioner Smelker and I have had conversations on that and don't necessarily agree on the path, but I'm sure we will continue to have those conversations.
Sure we will.
Well, it's kind of state funded by like 70%.
A lot of state and federal funds.
Yeah.
And just to answer or address part of the questions that the undersheriff asked is that Michael and I have sat down and talked about the screeners. He was waiting for some financial information to come in middle of March to help us with determination, but I think we have put a way forward, and that will be an agenda item in the near future, because we want to get that taken care of as well. So I did receive some information, and I think some of you have also received information about becoming a second amendment sanctuary county. I have not looked into that in detail. I think echoing some of the sentiments that were made is that with our sheriff, I think we are as close to a sanctuary county as we could be currently, because he is driven by the Constitution and some of the things in that aspect. So we will have some additional conversations on that forward, so.
Well, he can
going
come
forward.
and talk. Could Dar come and give a talk on that?
At some point, yep, that would be welcome. One of the other ARPA updates too, I know in working closely with Berry Township, they did open their bids for the water tower. They were hoping to get construction started on that this spring. Some of the engineering fees and the bids came in higher than they were anticipated, so they are looking for some additional funding sources. Some of that may come back to the board, and they may actually rebid. They haven't decided quite what they're going to do with that yet, but they are hoping to move forward with that in the near future. But as anticipated with the inflation economy that we're in and some of the things happening, they didn't quite hit the numbers that were anticipated on that, but they are working with us, working forward for a solution on that. So, and we will, Commissioner Tunison, we will investigate the Compensation Commission, give you some information on that. It'd probably be good to sit down with Michael Brown and go into some details on how that works, why it works, and why they meet odd years, how that's all set up, so there's an understanding there, because I think we did drop the ball on some of that last year, just with the timing of when everything was going through, a few other things. But in any event, full house today. We appreciate your support. We appreciate the attendance, the good public comment, all the good work. We appreciate the recognition, as some of you have been with us several years. We haven't always had very friendly comments towards your board. So it's nice to know that maybe we're doing something that actually we are listening to you and moving forward in the right direction. So thank you. And with that, no further information or comments. Our meeting is adjourned.